My name is Henny Admoni. I'm an associate professor in the Robotics Institute at Carnegie Mellon University, and I study human-robot interaction. Ananya, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Ananya. I'm a PhD student in the Robotics Institute, and I work on planning for space robotics. Peter?
Hey, I'm Peter Scheldenbrand. I'm a PhD student at the Robotics Institute, and I work on creative robots and robot painting. Maybe Raina next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Raina. I'm a first-year PhD, and I work in human-robot interaction.
Awesome. And we're joined, we're supported in the background by fabulous staff, including Leo and Rachel. So thank you guys for helping us out with this. Great. Okay, so the procedure is this. We're going to give you a presentation for about half an hour, and then we will have about half an hour open for Q&A. So let's get started. The goal of this webinar is to cover the process of applying to grad school, why you might want to do it and how you should go about it, and also to give you a sense of what grad school is like. So I'm going to start by explaining why you might consider going to grad school, and then the students will take over to cover the rest. Go ahead. Oh, and I should say that this is our best information, but we are not the official source of information for the department. So if you are told something different by a university or by our department, they are correct. And everything that we're talking about here is meant to help you, but is not, we're doing our best, but one size does not fit all. So that's our disclaimer. So why might you want to go to grad school? If you're here, you're probably thinking about that. So when you're deciding on grad school, there are a couple of major decisions you need to make. The first one is to decide whether what you want to do is get a master's degree or a PhD. And there are some important differences that just dictate how you make that decision. So if you want to go to a shorter program, you might want to do a master's degree. There are usually different types of master's degrees. Some of them are professional masters. These tend to be course-based, so you're doing a lot of classes the way you were doing in your undergraduate degree, but they give you more specialized training in a particular area that lets you focus deeper on one topic compared to what you did in undergraduate. Oftentimes, these will have some sort of capstone project or final project, but it's not usually a thesis. You might hear these called terminal masters or course-based masters or industry-focused masters. On the other hand, research master's degrees tend to focus on getting students to do research. So they're usually the same length as professional master's degrees, but more of your time in the program is spent doing research. At Carnegie Mellon, about half of your time is spent taking courses and half is spent doing research. And you're expected to put together a master's thesis at the end, which is a document that describes the work that you did and a presentation of the work that you did at the end of the degree. Typically, all of these programs are approximately 2 years long, plus minus, and they are often, at least in the United States, self-funded programs, which means you are paying to go to this program. The flip side of that is the PhD degree. That's your other option for graduate school in robotics. In the PhD, these tend to be much longer programs, usually 5 or more years. And the focus is really on doing research. So you take classes at the beginning of your PhD. At Carnegie Mellon, you take classes for the first 2 or 3 years, but then much of your time is spent doing original work and putting together a dissertation. A PhD degree gives you chances to teach by being a teaching assistant and to mentor other people, and is really the right track if what you want to do is have a research career. So if you want to go into research, whether that's industry research or to stay in academia and become a professor or an academic researcher, the PhD is usually the gateway to get there. One operative thing about PhDs in the United States, and particularly at Carnegie Mellon, is that they are typically funded. So at CMU, when you are admitted to the Robotics Institute, you're guaranteed 5 years of funding, which means that you don't pay to get the degree. In fact, you get a small stipend to support you while you're doing it. The PhD program can vary a lot by person, but typically it follows a sort of loose structure like the one that's shown on the slide. So as I said, you're doing research throughout your degree. You're basically spending at least half, if not all of your time doing research from year one, but you are also completing coursework in the first 2 years. You have to, at Carnegie Mellon, you have to take 8 courses in a variety of areas. And then after you're done with your coursework, you pass a qualifying exam. This at CMU, in the Robotics Institute, consists of 3 components: a speaking exam where you give an oral presentation, the written component where you have to write a research paper, and the research skills component where you meet with committee members and show that you've developed sufficient research abilities. Once you do that, you are in full-time research mode. When you're about a year and a half out from your final research, when you have some sense of what you want to do, you do your proposal. This defines what your dissertation is going to be. And you spend the next year and a half or 2 years doing your dissertation and writing it up and giving a presentation. So this is an approximate structure for a PhD program. People's experiences do vary depending on their areas and the kind of experience that they come in with. So this was a lot of information, and you might be wondering if there's an easy way to figure out if you should do a master's or PhD. Unfortunately, it's very person dependent, but we put together this little decision tree to help you figure that out. So if you are somebody who likes being in school and enjoys the academic environment, then you might be considering going on for a graduate degree. And then you need to make the decision about whether you want to focus on building specialized skills to get a job at a company, or building research skills to get a career doing more research. If you want to focus on industry skills, you should consider a professional master's degree. If you want to focus on research skills, you should consider either doing a research-based master's program if you are new to research or want to build up more of your research portfolio, or if you've already done research and you know that you like it and you have a good base in it, and you're excited about spending 5 or 6 years at a particular place studying a particular topic, then you might consider applying for the PhD. And now I will pass it over to talk about the nuts and bolts of how to actually apply.
Thanks, Henny. So there are typically 4 major components of an application, regardless of what school or particular program you're applying to, which are the CV, which is like an extended resume-ish, the statement of purpose, your letters of recommendation, and then your test scores and transcripts from your undergraduate degree. So your CV is where you essentially list down all of your different experiences, whether it be in research, internships, any fellowships or awards you've won, any experience that you have with things like academic service, volunteering, TAing, all of these different things that display how you've spent your time so far and how you've collected experiences or skills that are relevant to the program you're applying to. Depending on what prior experience you have, you don't necessarily have to come in with a ton of research experience. You could include course projects if they were tied to the kind of work that you want to be doing in the graduate program, but you want to prioritize putting in research experience or experience that's relevant to the program you're applying to. A CV is also typically longer and more detailed than a resume. You're not tied to sticking to a single page, so you can put in a little bit more information about each of your experiences, but you still want to make sure that the way you present your information is easy to digest for the person reading it. People who are reviewing applications are typically skimming through CVs and then actually reading your statement of purpose. So you want to make sure they can get the highlights of your experiences quickly. If you have papers you've published or talks you've given, adding links to those in your CV can be really great. We all read CVs digitally now, so being able to click over into other things that you've done would be awesome. And while there isn't a strict page limit, it is a good idea to stick to like a couple of pages, again, because people are skimming these and don't typically have a ton of time to read through like a 6-page document, especially when you're applying to grad school. And make sure that when you add your bullet points under each of your experiences, you want to make them very action-oriented or focused on the results that you got. So adding in numbers for things that you've done is typically really great. Highlighting like the specific component of a project that you worked on, or like you designed this thing on CAD and it's now X% more efficient or something like that, is a really good way to highlight your specific contributions to maybe a larger project. Okay, and that brings us to the statement of purpose, which is where you tell the university you're applying to what you want to study, why you want to study it, and why you are a great fit for that program at that particular school. So those are kind of like the 3 main ideas you're trying to communicate. The research area that you want to pursue and why you want to pursue it. Why is this important to both you and to the world at large? Like, why is this something that should be studied at all? Why are you the right person to be studying this problem? And that's kind of where you go into prior experience, and you can tie that in to the problems that you want to explore and why these prior experiences have given you the skills that you need to tackle this problem that you want to think about. And then finally, you want to specify why that program or that university is the right place for you to be exploring this problem. So that can be everything from like particular professors that you want to work with that have experience in these areas. It could be resources that the program has. So at the RI, there are a lot of just like prototyping and building resources that the entire department has access to. So if you want to build a thing, then that might be a good thing to mention. And then also, how does this program fit into your larger goals? Like, do you want to be a professor? Do you want to be in a research position in industry? Do you want to work in industry? Are there connections or contacts or something else that this program has that would put you in a really good place for what comes next? So basically, an ideal SOP would not repeat your CV. You want to highlight experiences that your CV doesn't give you the space to talk about. You want to highlight information about yourself that is important, but the rest of the application doesn't give you space to put in. So things like your goals, how you want to give back to the community, whether like if that's important to you, how has your experience built up who you are and what you want to do next. And so the SOP is really your chance to tell your story and focus on the things that are unique to you and how that fits in to the larger pictures of both the department you're applying to and just like the research world at large. We've linked a bunch of resources on each of these individual slides. So if you hop over to the website, you can click on all of these links and see a bunch of examples and a bunch of like more specific details on how to phrase things and things like that.
So I'll be talking about the letters of recommendation, another important part of the application. So you're going to probably have to ask 3 people to give you letters of recommendation. And you want these to be strong letters. So you want these to be people that you know that are going to be able to speak to your capabilities and why you should be in graduate school. So these will often come from research advisors, internship mentors, or professors of classes that you've like PA'd. So those are going to be strong letters from those people because you've worked pretty closely with them. And then less strong letters are going to come from people like professors who you've maybe only taken their class and spoken to once or twice, even if you've gotten an A, or employers that you did not work very close with. So you might be tempted to ask these people, the latter 2 people, for recommendation because maybe it looked good, but if you don't know them very well, then they won't be able to write a strong letter. So if you're in that position where you want to ask them, just make sure that you get some one-on-one time. Try to get as much like face-to-face time so they can get to know you, so they can write an accurate and representative letter. So some help with writing your letters. So choose people that you know well, because you want them to be able to speak very specifically about you, because that's going to make a strong letter. And you want to make sure that you reach out very early beforehand, basically as early as possible. You want to ask them, and then you're going to have to follow up 2 to 3 weeks before the deadline for sure. But you can also like send email reminders relatively frequently, like every few weeks you could send a reminder. Maybe not every week, you don't want to like annoy somebody, but the people that you're asking will will appreciate reminders from time to time because they are busy and they will get to it when they can, but sometimes they forget. You also want to make it as easy as possible for them. So include supporting materials and talking points. So if you did an internship, give a good description of what you did there, because they may have forgotten certain details. Give them copies of almost all of your materials that you'll send for your graduate application. So definitely your CV, your statement of purpose, even if it's not complete, send them a draft. And yeah, your transcript or anything else that's going to help them. Sometimes the reviewer or the recommender may ask you to like even write a draft of the recommendation letter. Sometimes that happens, so you should do that. But even if they don't, you can write up kind of like a cover letter that has everything that you want them to talk about. You know, they may or may not include it, but you don't want them to forget something important. So just try to give them as much info as possible. Fellowships. So this is just a slide to kind of describe that there are a lot of fellowships available for many different people. So it makes your life a lot better if you can get a fellowship, essentially. You'll have a lot more freedom on what you can work on, and it'll make you a stronger applicant if you already have one. So it's really important to look into these and try to apply to them. Their application process is very similar to a lot of the graduate school application processes. So if you're getting a recommendation letter now for graduate school, you can also ask them to maybe revise it for a particular fellowship. Finding a program. So there are tons of PhD programs. So it doesn't always just come down to, or it comes down to like a fit. Like there are professors who could take the student on, but there's also like different programs. There's a lot of things to kind of balance. So before applying, you should identify some of the professors in the program whose work that you find interesting or exciting, because you're going to be working very closely with one particular person. So make sure that it's a good fit both in their work and maybe like just a fit overall. Mention specific professors that you'd like to work with and why their interests align with you in your statement of purpose. So your potential advisor will probably be reading your statement of purpose. So make sure that when you write this, they read that part and they're excited to work with you. You want to make sure that they have all the information to decide if this is somebody they want to work with for the next 5 to 6 years. And yeah, emailing a professor, it just kind of depends. So this link will help you decide if you should. Well, there's a few conditions there, but sometimes it is a good time to do it and sometimes it's not. Certain programs offer application fee waivers. So the School of Computer Science at Carnegie Mellon offers graduate application fee waivers for reasons related to financial hardship and to participants of certain programs. So this is a link you can check out. So this is a truncated list. There's actually a lot more reasons why you could get a application fee waiver. So make sure you check that out. Okay, and then I think as part of the last segment, we'll just describe a little bit about what grad school is like. So differences between the US and international PhD programs or graduate school programs. In the US, you will apply for a specific program, such as a PhD in robotics, as opposed to a specific project. So I think in some nations, you will be applying for a project, but in this case, it's a program, which is a little bit more general. Funding situations vary. So in the US, PhDs are typically fully funded. They are at Carnegie Mellon, and to some extent, master's programs can be too, if they're research-based or have some teaching component. So make sure you look into that for each particular program. And some people come straight from undergrad programs, but some people that are doing, say, PhDs also have master's experience, or maybe they've worked for a number of years. The US PhD takes 5 to 6 years typically. I think it's different in some other places. The US is also huge, so your experience will definitely vary. There will be different weather, city infrastructure, cost of living is going to vary greatly, and each city has its own culture. So these are things to look into when you look into a program. And I will kind of describe like a relatively typical day in each of us as graduate students' lives.
All right, cool. So I try to get to campus fairly early in the day, around 9 a.m. And I start my day with writing out a priority list, just because depending on what emails I've gotten, depending on what's happened in the last 24 hours, that can get upended sometimes. And I find it a lot easier to focus if I sort of club my meetings into blocks. So I typically have external meetings with either sponsors or professors at other universities, collaborations, things like that in the morning, when I am more poised to be an actual functional human. And then I try to get a little bit of research done, but the communication side of research. So making slides, writing proposals, writing emails, contacting people about things, all of that stuff. Take a quick lunch break. I am finishing up the classes that I need to take currently. So right now I also take classes somewhere in the middle of my day. And then closer to the end of my day, I will do internal meetings. So with my advisor, with my lab group, with undergrads that I work with, other collaborators at other labs within the university, things like that. And then I do some of the actual science part of research. So whether it's working on code or reading more papers or analyzing results for a paper I'm writing, all of that good stuff. And then I end my day with going to the gym with some friends, doing some homework because I still have to do that, and then finishing up any other work that I didn't get to during the day.
So yeah, a typical day for me will be waking up around somewhere like 8:30 and eating breakfast. I'm not a super early riser. Around 9 a.m. I will be going to the lab, and then first thing is usually like communication, get my emails done, respond to Slack messages I may have missed from the previous evening. And then yeah, for like 2 hours or so, it's not all of these things, but probably one of these at a time. Like I may have some papers to read. I may try to write some code to test things out. Try things on the robot and maybe prepare some presentations. So probably one of those. That's my robot on the right. That's Franco used for robot painting. I also have one in my room now because I had COVID, so I brought it home to get some work done then. Yeah, then lunch, try to find some friends to eat with. After that, maybe I'll have some like meetings. So I have two different types of meetings, usually project meetings, which will be like a group of people, maybe we're working on a paper. And then I'll have some one-on-one meetings. So either like with my advisor or maybe some of the people that I'm mentoring. In the early evening, I'll go back to doing some like research work, reading papers, writing code, testing things on the robot. But that definitely early evening, I'm taking more breaks to talk to friends and just kind of get around and catch up with people. Eat dinner around 6 to 7. In the evening, I play on the volleyball team or I go for a run. And then late night is pretty varied. Like I might hang out with friends or I might talk with family. But if there's a paper deadline around, I will probably be working again.
All right. I also wake up around 8 and eat breakfast. I take the bus to school. When I get in, I respond to emails, Slack messages, do a to-do list, just get myself set up for the day. Oops. Yeah, it says 10 to 12, I guess PM. Yeah. And then I will read papers. I just matched with an advisor. So I'm just starting a new research project. I'm working on my fellowship applications, doing a little bit of research work from my undergrad, just tying up loose ends. And then 12 to 1 is when I eat lunch with my friends in the common room. And then from 1 to 3, I am taking 2 classes. So it's either class time or this is when I schedule meetings with my advisor, and I have lab meetings on the days that I don't have classes. And then 3 p.m. is my favorite time of coffee break. CMU has 2 great coffee machines. And then sometimes I will switch locations and go somewhere else just to get a different view. And then I will do either homework or research depending on what my priorities are for that day. And then after that, I will try to go to the gym or go to club swim or just hang with friends. And then after that, dinner, homework, I'll get days to relax and take some time off.
So one of my favorite parts about being at the Robotics Institute is just how many topics are explored. So there's so many professors. The Robotics Institute might be larger than most schools of computer sciences at universities. So this was a particular lunch meeting, and you can see these are the different topics that each of them are working on. So within any given group of students at CMU, they might be working on a completely diverse set of problems within robotics. We also like to get together at conferences. So these are two very recent conferences, and you can see how large these groups of people are that we bring to conferences. ICRO was in London and IROS was in Detroit. So you can see we can sometimes travel very far with a large group of people. So yeah, more reasons why to choose CMU. So it's a top robotics program, 60 plus faculty members in robotics alone, 500 plus students. There's both breadth and depth in terms of topics. So you can do something kind of relatively broadly. There will be people that will help you do things broadly, but then there will be people who knows topics super specifically and help you with depth. It's also the first PhD in robotics in the world. So we've been at it for a long time and we've gone through many iterations of it. Strong collaboration with industry. So tons of ties to companies, also the government, and there are other academic departments that we work very closely with, like the machine learning department, electrical engineering, or human computer interaction. And these are all people that could be your potential advisor too, if you're, say, a PhD student in robotics. So you don't have to just work within the robotics, and these borders they're not very harsh. People work with other departments very easily. Pittsburgh has a really good cost of living. So this is something to look into because you're going to be maybe in a program for 5 to 6 years. So a 1-bedroom apartment rent is going to be around $800 to $1,300, and that's like pretty close to campus. So if you want to have a roommate, you can bring that cost down a lot. And a typical $2 sign dinner, which I guess is not the cheapest thing, but like maybe relatively normal restaurant will be like $15 to $20 per person. We also have free university supported health insurance for PhD students. And it also covers mental health resources. In my opinion, and maybe whoever made this slide's opinion, Pittsburgh is pretty fun. I actually do enjoy being here. So that link will take you to see some of the interesting stuff to do around Pittsburgh. Yeah, and so the PhD stipend is $38,400. And you'll be using that to live in Pittsburgh. So this is a slide that kind of compares what the cost of living is in different cities. So you'll make, if you're a PhD student at RI in Pittsburgh, you'll make $38,000, and you'll have a certain quality of life with that. And if you wanted to have all those things in a different city, say San Francisco, you would have to make $69,000. If you wanted to be in New York with the same quality, it'd be $88,000. So, and Boston, Seattle are also more. So you can see that if you're making the same amount, you can get a lot more for your dollar in Pittsburgh than other large cities.
Awesome. Before we get to questions, let's jump to the RISC program introduction. Yeah, there you go.
So the RISC program, called the Robotics Institute Summer Scholars, is a 10-week long paid summer research internship. And it's a kind of a great way to just get your feet wet into seeing if you like research. If you're a rising junior or a senior and you don't have research experience or you want more research experience, this is a great way to kind of experience that. So each student is paired with an advisor to conduct their own research, and before the program begins, the students will collaborate with their advisors to define their research objectives and discuss what potential projects are available for them to work on. And at the end of the summer, scholars write and submit papers to the RISC working journals, which is put on the RISC website. And they also present their work through poster sessions and video recordings, as well as discussions with other students and other professors. And doing this, students gain a lot of experience in academic reading, writing, and presentation methods. And some scholars choose to keep working with their advisor after the program ends as well. On top of the research, scholars are also expected to participate in at least one committee. For example, one of them is the journal team, which supervises the submission and review process of the papers, work on the visual design of them, and just coordinate with the program directors on making sure the journal is ready to go. I was on the external marketing and community engagement team. We started up the RIS Instagram and featured scholars, professors, visiting talks and all of that. So did a lot of just community engagement, making aware of what's going on in robotics and at CMU. And then scholars are also split into groups where each week, one group is in charge of organizing a social event for the entire cohort. It's a great way for people to take initiative and also just for people to get out and have fun. One of my favorite ones was we went to the zoo, and the Pittsburgh has a great zoo, which I didn't know and wouldn't have known if someone hadn't organized it. Aside from that, we also have time to go explore Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of festivals and events happening here in the summer. Picklesburg was one of my favorite memories. If pickles aren't your thing, we also painted the fence, which is a CMU tradition, and if you're interested in that, you should go look it up. And so, we painted the fence and said RIS, and it was a really great bonding experience. And so RIS also gives you a lot of chances to form connections, both with research and industry and just the general robotics community in and out of Pittsburgh. It's a very international program too, so you're making friends from all over the world. And you're getting a lot of support from CMU, the RI, and just staff and faculty who are there to kind of make sure you succeed and you get a really good learning experience. And so after you graduate from the RIS program, you'll kind of be thrown into the RIS alumni community where you can network, have discussions, just make great friends. So if you are considering graduate school or want to see what graduate level research looks like, or what even just research looks like, this might be a really good way to just kind of see what's going on. And then if you could go to the next slide. And so the program dates are from June 1st to August 5th. Applications start November 1st and run for a couple months. And so, yeah, I had a really great time in this program and recommend it to anyone.
Right. Awesome. So I think we can now go into some of the questions we've gotten on both the form and through the webinar so far. So the first question is, are publications required for admission into graduate programs? And I think, Henny, if you want to take this one.
Sure. I was typing an answer to a different question. Publications are not required at any level. However, having a publication shows evidence that you have been through the research process. So if you have a publication, even if you have written and submitted a publication, that's always important to put on your CV and talk about, because it allows us to see that you know what research involves, that you've been through research, and that you have succeeded at it. So don't be discouraged if you don't have any publications, but if you're strategically thinking about how to spend your time as a senior undergrad or in the time after you've graduated, working on publications is a good idea as a way of demonstrating your research capacity.
Awesome, thanks. So again, tied to gathering application materials, another question is, what should I do if I don't have enough letters of recommendation? And really, anyone who wants to can take this.
I mean, they don't always have to be just like professors that you've had. So you can find somebody, if you did some volunteering opportunities, you can ask whoever's the coordinator there. I think you can totally find, 3 people to write your recommendation. You just have to kind of maybe reconsider what are some of the more traditional people to give you those. Yeah, the strongest ones probably do come from like an academic research advisor and then like a professor in general, but like a lot of other people will be able to speak to your qualities. So yeah, reach out to them too.
Cool. More application material things. In long-term goals in the statement of purpose, is it a good idea to talk about general big ideas, for example, working on self-driving cars or deep space exploration robots, or should they be made more specific?
I can take this one. So it is great to talk about your big goal. Here's my cat. It's great to talk about your big goals in the motivation of your SOP, but it's also helpful to go into some specifics about what you actually want to do. Usually because the big goals are ambitious, but don't give us a sense of where you want to spend your time and what kind of skills you have. And in reality, research is made up of a lot of little steps. And so if you're able to show us that you can think about those steps, it strengthens your application as a PhD student. But by all means, include those big goals in your motivation in your SOP so that we understand kind of your big vision, because we want to know, why you're going to graduate school. And if it's to do, space robotics, we want to know that too.
Great, thank you. The next question I think would be good to have a couple of different perspectives on. It is, when is it recommended to do a master's degree before applying to a PhD? I've heard that doing a master's might be good if you had limited research experience as an undergrad. So I can start with one perspective on this because I did do a master's also in the RI before I started the PhD. And the reason I decided to start with the master's or apply to the master's first is because I just wasn't sure if I wanted to do a PhD. I had done research for years at that point, but as an undergrad, so I wasn't sure if graduate school was an environment that I wanted to be in for 5 years or more. That being said, I regretted that decision quite instantly. Like 3 weeks into the master's, I was like, this is great. I should have just done the PhD, or I should have just applied to the PhD straight out. So I would say if you're even on the fence, like if you have experience and you are on the fence, apply, push your decision either to the external forces that be about what program you get into, or just to how you're feeling in a few months, because you submit applications like months and months before you would actually be joining the program. And I think that my mindset very much changed just in the few months between application deadline and hearing back from programs. That being said, I had a great time in my master's, so I don't regret doing it. I just wish I had given PhD programs a shot when I was applying.
I can answer the other side of that. I came straight from undergrad. And the reason I decided to go for a PhD program was actually because of risk. But I really had a great time just doing research, and I had all these big ideas. And I said, well, I'm going to need a really long time and a lot of just support and education to get to those big ideas that I had. So that was part of the reason why I wanted to apply to a PhD program. Sometimes it's worth asking, and after your PhD program or after your degree, what you want to do. You don't have to know, but that can also impact your decision on which program you apply for.
I want to tie this actually back to the answer to a previous question. So the question was about what if you don't have enough letter writers? And if you do a master's degree, that is an opportunity to get more letter writers, both the person who directly advises your master's research and also any collaborators you might have. So if you're finding that you're struggling to identify people who can talk about you as a researcher, that might be a sign that you have less research experience, and a master's degree might be a good way of building that up.
Awesome. The next question I know has a pretty nuanced answer, but how early should I contact professors about working with them?
It's complicated. So some schools do what we call direct admissions, which is where you apply to the program, but when you're admitted to work in a specific group with a specific professor. Other schools do cohort admissions, where you apply to the program and a committee decides on who gets admitted, and people are admitted as a group as a cohort rather than into an individual lab. And then they match, once they get to the university, they match up to professors. CMU does the latter. So we have a cohort system. So you're not ever admitted into a particular group or by a particular person. You're admitted by a committee, which means that contacting faculty individually is less helpful because that person can't actually give you an offer. What they can do is read your application and give comments to the committee and advocate for you. So in a direct admission situation, it makes more sense to contact faculty directly. The decisions get, I would say the fall is probably the right time to do that, the fall before you want to start. So your applications go in around November or December. So around the time that your applications are going in is when you should contact faculty, because that's when they're going to be thinking about admission. There's, yeah. And it, again, I will say that faculty get a lot of email about working with them. So the more specific your email is about why you in particular want to work with that faculty member in particular, the more helpful it is for your case. So just avoid generic emails that are not tailored to a particular person.
Awesome, thanks. This is a CMU specific question. Does CMU offer scholarships for international PhD students aiming to take a short-term research experience at the university?
Not to my knowledge directly, although there are many organizations that do offer short-term research experiences like the Fulbright. I know there's like German exchange programs. There's governments of different countries that offer short-term exchanges. So those are always opportunities to look into, and it's possible that CMU could do that in the future. To my knowledge, we don't have a specific program for international students right now.
Okay, the next question. How much do poor grades in undergrad affect PhD master's admission? With the added information of what if I also have stronger research or better grades in a master's degree?
I don't want to dominate the question answering, but having been on the admissions committee, I can say the more recent grades are more important. And if you're applying to a PhD program, research is the #1 thing we're looking at. So your grades should not be terrible because that is an indicator of certain capacity. But if your grades are mediocre, but you're doing great research, that will weigh more heavily, that will look better than if your grades are stellar, but you have very little research experience.
Great. Next question is, can I apply to robotics programs with degrees outside of CS, EE, and MECE? I can do a preliminary answer to this, and people should chime in, but I would say yes. It's not the degree title that impacts whether or not you would get into a program. It is all down to your experiences. I know people who spent the majority of their undergraduate doing architecture stuff, but they built a bunch of skills that translated very directly to robotics and ended up getting a master's in robotics. So I don't think the title of the degree really matters that much. It's more what you spent those 4 years doing.
And what you want to do with it. So I completely agree with what Ananya said. It's exactly right. And I will add, I mean, people come, I study human robot interaction, so people come to my field from cognitive science as well as from more traditional CS backgrounds. Robotics is very interdisciplinary. And so this degree in particular is a place where lots of people come from lots of different places. That should not stop you. Like Ananya said, you want to make sure your skills are aligned and you want to have a good reason for wanting to switch your academic focus for what you want to do in the future.
Okay, this is a little bit specific, but the question is, I tried getting into CMU last year, I was rejected, should I apply again? From personal experience, my answer would be yes. I was rejected the first time I applied to CMU's PhD program, and I got in the second time that I applied. So I think a lot can change in a year. So I would say yes.
Rejected the first time. But yeah, keep applying for sure.
I was rejected from CMU and I never applied again, but now I'm faculty here. So yeah, I mean, getting rejected from a program might not reflect on your capacity to do well in that program. We have fewer spots to offer. then we have eligible candidates. So it might just mean that you didn't rise to the top, but you were close. In PhD in particular, if you're applying for a PhD program and you get rejected, it might mean that you were a great candidate, but there was nobody in your area who was looking to take on new students that year. Or there were just a lot of applications of people with, in that area. And so each person had a harder time getting in. So by all means, apply again. Getting rejected, we don't carry applications forward year to year. When you do apply again, you should spend that year doing something that makes your application even stronger. And that should be reflected in your application again.
Cool. Last couple questions. Does having incremental work published in a less prestigious journal hurt my application?
I'll say quickly, no. It doesn't hurt your application. Having gone through the research process and showing us that you know how to do research and then write a paper and then get it published at any level is good. The more prestigious the venue, the stronger that speaks to your research ability.
Great. How do I find out if a professor in my interested area is taking students? The website does mention this, but how do I know if it's updated or if it's from a few years back?
Sometimes you can't. Sometimes you do know. So this is a situation where you can email the professor and ask them if they are taking students. You can also try to contact the members of the lab and see if they have any insight into that. I will say this also changes rapidly. So you apply in December or even November, and admissions don't come out until March, and funding situations can change in that time. And so somebody who might not have been taking students before might be taking students suddenly. So I would say it's worth identifying who you want to work with and applying, even if you're not sure that at that moment that person is taking students.
Great. Yeah. And I want to second the reaching out to members of the lab or some of the professor's current PhD students, because typically they have some guess as to the direction the lab is heading in, whether it's like, oh no, we're trying to like reduce size or stay the size we're at, or yeah, we're trying to like grow people and we're trying to recruit heavily and all of that. So there's a chance people have information about that. Okay. So a general question, but how can people get feedback on statements of purpose or CVs? Like, are there forums? Are there people to reach out to in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of schools will have specific like writing centers that can help you with more general advice on how to write. That's a good thing to be thinking about. Send your statement of purpose to like as many people as you can. No person can give you like perfect advice, so you need to get a bunch of different sets of feedback on it, and the more feedback you get, the better. Yeah, as far as like where to send it, if there's forums, I'm not exactly sure, but see if you can find some graduate students who have written them before, and certainly professors if they're willing to help. Ask them.
Yep, I would second that. Grad students are fairly easy to reach out to, I think, and potentially less intimidating than reaching out to a professor if that's something you're worried about. And most, if not all of us, are happy to help if we have the bandwidth. So.
Yeah, even having your like friends or anyone just look it over is a really good idea. Just maybe you keep editing it, and then you get stuck in this loop of just, you see the same thing. So it's definitely a really good idea to just have different set of eyes, fresh set of eyes, look at them.
Okay, awesome. And our last question is less tied to the application materials specifically, but it is, could you guys share your motivation behind your research as examples? And I think that might be a fun way to end the webinar. So I can start very briefly. I work on path planning techniques for both space robotics and search and rescue. And the motivation came from a combination of that. Those are the problems that excite me. And I think space robots are really cool. And it would be nice to be involved with something that goes explores a different planet and teaches us more about what's going on up there. But on the other hand, I am focused on building algorithms that kind of account for real life issues. So like you don't have unlimited power, you don't have unlimited sensing, you have limitations on everything that you have shown up with on your robot. And that motivation comes from like having lived in and having witnessed parts of the world where like throwing money at the problem is not an option. So a bit of, I think it's cool, and also life experience, I guess.
I can go next. I am interested in a lot of accessibility technology. My big research topics that I've worked on are with people who are blind or low vision. And so part of my research motivation is that I am really interested in just finding technology that can be applied to use to help people just in different various ways. That's just something, it was easy for me to kind of think of those ideas, just kind of take a walk around the world and say, okay, like, what are these things that are needed? But then also not just, thinking of my own ideas, but also working with people who would be using these research ideas. So I do a lot of co-designing and with physicians, with people who are blind or low vision, and just their caretakers to make sure that the research I do impacts them and not just, I do them for the sake of research.
But painting mostly and kind of artistic robots. And I think originally it was just very interesting for me to like work on that type of problem. I enjoy art very much. And I wanted to work on ways to make technology work for people and make more powerful art and new ways to do it and bring new voices based on different capabilities. So I think it was really cool to bring technology into something that I'm just passionate about in general.
And I think humans are fascinating. And I think building algorithmic models of humans helps us understand cognitive psychology better. And I'm also very inspired by the idea that technology can help people live more independently or more in the way that they want. So I work in assistive and collaborative robots, and I think a lot about how to make robots that make people's lives better.
Awesome. I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Thank you all so much for being part of the webinar, and thank you to everyone who joined both on Zoom and on YouTube. If you know people who wanted to join this webinar and couldn't make it to this session, we have 2 other sessions this week, tomorrow and on Friday. We also have a website where the slides will be posted. Links to the recorded versions of all of this will be up, and a form of questions if you had questions you wanted to ask that we couldn't get to today, that we could answer in a future session.